Welcome to VLearn, Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 39 of the subject India, earliest times to the 8th century AD, and the chapter is Developments in Religion. Topics to be covered are Introduction, Emergence of Bhakti in Brahmanism, Spread of Bhakti to South India, Bhakti movement in South India, Protest and reform in the Bhakti movement of the South and later transformation of the Bhakti movement, emergence of Tantrism. Introduction. The simple prayers of the Rig Veda gave place gradually to complex rituals dominated by Brahmins, and one can notice the growth of a close relationship between the Brahmins and the rulers and warriors in this situation. So the simple prayers of the Rig Veda, they gave place to complex rituals, and that was dominated by the Brahmins, and one can notice the growth of a close relationship between the Brahmins as well as the rulers and warriors. Not only the wandering ascetics who moved away from the established society, but also the Buddhists and the Jains who did not accept the dominance of the Brahmins and the rigid social and moral order which the Brahmins advocated. So not only the ascetics, the lower class, but also the established society, the Buddhists and the Jains, they did not accept the dominance of the Brahmins, of the Brahmin class, and the rigid social structure, the rigid moral structure which they had imposed on the people. Thus, there grew the heterodox movements which received support not only from rulers and rich merchants but also from other sections of people. So, there emerged a lot of different movements, heterodox movements which received support from the all classes of the society, the rich as well as the middle class sections of people. Emergence of Bhakti in Brahmanism. Brahmanism had to accept the growing importance of new gods like Shiva and Vishnu side by side with Vedic gods like Indra and Varun. So Brahmanism, they had to accept the growing importance of new gods like Shiva and Vishnu side by side with Vedic gods like Indra and Varuna. It also assimilated many other popular deities like Vasudeva, Skanda, and also other deities. All these led to the growth of the Bhakti cult. Around the 4th century BC, the cult of Vasudeva was becoming popular. This is suggested by reference to it by classical authors like Megasthenes, who came to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. So around the 4th century BC, the cult of Vasudeva was also becoming popular, and this is suggested by the reference to it by classical authors. The worshippers of Vasudeva submitted to Bhakti as the proper religious approach and called themselves Bhagavatas. So the worshippers of Vasudeva, they submitted themselves to Bhakti as the proper religious approach, and they called themselves Bhagavatas. They called themselves Bhagavatas and they submitted to the Bhakti and in the devotion of God. Syncretism of deities. An important characteristic of the new Brahmanism was its genius to syncretize many local deities and to evolve a monotheistic great god. So there was syncretism of deities. There were many local deities were also syncretized to evolve a monotheistic great god. Syncretism in this context will mean that deities worshipped at different places and by different people were recognized as identical and were worshipped as manifestation of the same supreme deity. So many different deities at different places were worshipped by different people, and they were also recognized as identical, as same, and they were worshipped as manifestation of the same supreme deity, and they were worshipped as the manifestation of the same supreme almighty, the deity. Thus Vasudeva was identified with Vishnu, a minor Vedic god, and Narayana, and a god of obscure origin mentioned in the Brahman literature. Emergence of Bhakti in Brahmanism, adaptation of tribal rituals. Yet another important feature of later Brahmanism was its adaptation of the tribal rituals, keeping the Vedic yajna rites supreme only in theory. In course of time, the merit derived out of these new rituals were equated with the merit of the Vedic yajna. Further, the sacred spots of the tribals were included as new places of pilgrimage with suitable myths to make them respectable. So, in course of time, the merit derived out of these new rituals were also equated with the merit of the Vedic yajna, and the sacred spots of the tribals, they were also included as new places of pilgrimage with suitable myths to make them respectable. Itihasas and Puranas are full of such material on stories which inspire bhakti, devotion to a personal god. So the Puranas are full of such material of the stories which inspire devotion to a particular god, bhakti and devotion. Royal support to temples and theism. The Puranas highlighted the merits acquired by visiting great cult centers like Mathura and Varanasi, which were major places of pilgrimage. So, there were all support to temples and theism. The Puranas, they highlighted the merits which was acquired by visiting great cult centers like Mathura and Varanasi, and which were considered major places of pilgrimage. This gave a stimulus to the institution of the temple. In fact, the Puranas and other texts of the period list numerous places of pilgrimage, tirths, which drew devotees in large numbers because visiting tirths would ensure merit. The temple which housed the deity became a place of worship and thus drew devotees away from home to an institution which became a public center. So the temple which housed the deity, that also became a place of worship and it drew devotees away from home to an institution which almost that became a public center. And the Puranas as well as the texts of the period, the places of pilgrimage or the tirths which drew devotees in large numbers because they considered that when they visit tirths, that would ensure merit and that would remove all sins. So the Tirth Yatra, which was also made popular during that time. Spread of bhakti to the south. All the major North Indian religions, Brahmanism, Jainism and Buddhism, travelled southwards. So all the major North Indian religions, they travelled southwards. The Brahmins brought with them the Vedic Yajna cult and the two theistic cults, Vaishnavism and Saivism. The kings were in favour of the Vedic rituals as they conferred ritual status on them. The theistic cults struck root among the people. So the Brahmins brought with them the Vedic Yajna cult and the two theistic cults also, Vaishnavism and Saivism. So the Brahmins also brought two theistic cults with them, Vaishnavism as well as Saivism, and the kings were in favor of the Vedic rituals as they conferred ritual status on them. The ritual status was conferred on the kings, that is why they were in favor of the Vedic rituals. And the theistic cults, the theistic cults struck root among the people. However, eventually the devotional theistic cults, they were to prove stronger than any other religious force in the south, and this was recognized even by royal patrons who extended support to Vaishnavism, Saivism and their sects. Bhakti movement in South India. The final form of theistic bhakti was largely the result of the influence of the Tamil devotionalism. This devotionalism was a product of the fusion between ecstatic local tribal cults and northern theistic schools. So the final form of theistic bhakti, that was largely the result of the influence of the Tamil devotion, the devotionalism of Tamil, and this devotionalism was also the product of fusion between ecstatic local tribal cults and northern theistic schools. This cross fertilization started at Tirupati and Kalahasti, which then constituted the northern door of the Tamil country. Then it developed around Kanchipuram, the Pallava capital, and soon reached the region of Madurai, the Pandyan capital. The Tirumurugu Arupadai, a famous devotional work on Muruga, the local tribal god who was syncretized with Skanda in this work, is the earliest example of this cross-fertilization. Protest and reform in the Bhakti movement of the south and later transformation of the Bhakti movement. Whereas the Brahmins were obsessed with caste regulations, the Bhakti movement not only ignored caste but also included men and women of all castes. So Bhakti movement, irrespective of the class and religion as well as the gender, it ignored caste but it included men and women of all castes. Among the Nayanar, Kadaikal Amarnai was a woman and Nandanar was a member of the depressed class. Among the Alvars, Andal was a woman and Tirupan was a hymnist from a low caste. Thus the whole movement carried elements of protest and reform. However, it soon became part of the establishment, lost its early character and got engulfed by Brahmanical orthodoxy. So the whole movement carried elements, there were elements of protest also and the reform elements were also there. However, it soon became part of the establishment. It also lost its early character and that got engulfed in the Brahmanical orthodoxy. Emergence of Tantrism. The religious practices which originated in the most primitive fertility rites of the non-Aryan tribal circles later came to be known as Tantrism. It not only infiltrated into other civilized cults but also emerged as a challenge and reaction to these cults, as all of them had developed vested interests and had become parts of the establishment by the early medieval period. So, Tantrism not only infiltrated into other civilized cults but it also emerged as a challenge and reaction to these cults, as all of them had developed vested interests, their own private interests, and had become parts of the establishment. The established forms of religion modified Tantrism and attempted to sublimate it through mystical interpretations and symbols. So the mystical interpretations and symbols, they were also used to interpret the various religion modified Tantrism. Some main features of Tantrism: there always existed a marginal population to whom sorcery, fertility rites, and secret tribal cults seemed essential. People who felt dissatisfied with the official civilized religion continued to learn and adopt these secret rites through the ages. In the tantric practices of the early medieval period, we can see three important features. All of them were interconnected. They are a higher status given to women, sexual rituals, and the presence of many female deities. So, the important feature, the higher status was given to women, and the presence of lot of female deities was also there in this. Tantrism and the heterodox religions. It was noted that the primitive fertility rites reappeared sublimated in form as Tantrism and penetrated Buddhism, Jainism, and the Brahman theology. Makhali Gosala, contemporary of the Buddha and Mahavira, not only went naked but is said to have drunk and practiced orgiastic sexual rites, which doubtless originated in the primitive cults. Early Buddhism and Jainism tried their best to check the infiltration of these tantric practices into their cults. So that was all about the Tantrism, the religion, and the early religion at that particular point of time. Questions, you have to do it yourself. Question number 1, discuss the main features of Tantrism in about 10 lines. Question number 2, discuss the relationship of Tantrism with other heterodox religions in 10 lines. Thank you. That's all. Happy learning. We learning.